when I was young, attending services, my favorite lesson moment would be Wednesday night. It seemed like the crowds got smaller, but when the numbers go down, quality's go up. And so I really like that. And I really like teaching. That's my passion. And I've enjoyed having home Bible studies over the years. What I want to do during this moment of time is to talk about reading. I talked to some college boys about reading, and I tell them it's not enough that you can pronounce the words. You need to be able to read, giving as Ezra did. You want to do it distinctly, that's the adverb there, giving sense to the reading. If you don't do that in your reading, you haven't read well. And so that's an essential. When I lived in Argentina, I felt like our men, and really, I lived where most of our members were poor readers. Now, at home Bible studies, I would always say, I don't ask anyone to read aloud in class to embarrass them. I want them to have the thrill of knowing that the Word of God has come from your own lips. And if you think more along that way, you will give better attention to reading. I remember one class, they'd be stuttering. You know, I try to give an example. How would a first grader read Genesis 1:1? They say, in the beginning. You know, discovering the word as they move along. But that's not the way you want to do publicly. Now, if you cannot do better, even try. It'll be powerful that you are trying, but you can do better. So what I suggested to the men, let's take the passages that we would like to read and memorize them. And so we had quite a variation. One person was reading from Isaiah 53, the whole chapter, even going to a few verses to the end of chapter 52 to make it a unit. Oh, we like that. And in memorizing, they could not be a slave to looking. They could engage the people. Like what happens with the first time reader? He's wanting to make sure, and I love that, wanting to make sure that I want to read everything. But when you know what the word is that's coming, you feel more comfortable, and you can even look at people. Not that I'm saying that's the most important thing, but they can tell that passage is in you, which is what we want to be able to do when we're reading. Everyone picks something different. I had one fella from John chapter 19, a lengthy passage. By the way, it was longer than the Isaiah 53 passage. It wasn't like they were just trying to memorize a verse or two. They were really trying to have a passage. And then the women started saying, oh, the reading from the Lord's Supper is very good. But see, once they knew how to do it the right way, it makes it possible to learn how to do it again in another situation. Now, when I talk about public reading, I'm trying to remember everything I've heard about it over time. I remember when I was in school, like high school, I would hear statements like, poetry is meant to be read aloud. That's interesting. It's meant to be read aloud. Now, let somebody say, well, I can read it, I will enjoy it just the same. But for teachers to say, it is meant to be read aloud, I found interesting. Now, since that time, I've learned that a third of the Old Testament is Hebrew poetry. A third. That would mean you probably need to read it aloud if you're going to be in sync with that idea of poetry deserving and needing to be read aloud. Now, I don't want to use a big word just for a big word, but the closest word I can give you right now is just for genres in the Bible. What do we mean about that? We mean they're narratives. By the way, narratives are the easiest things to read because we've had experience with narratives. At least growing up, everybody read the newspaper. Newspaper is basically a narrative telling you about what's happening and all of that. But when we get to poetry, people say, I don't know what happens to me. There are passages that I can read smoothly and get the sense of the meaning. But it seems like maybe when I'm reading the Psalms, I'm having a difficulty. Well, you know, reading aloud may require you to do some study. It may require you to expand your vocabulary. You know, if you're reading Shakespeare, I can assure you, I know it at least for myself, there's a big vocabulary. Well, let me say something you may already know. Shakespeare is accredited with 2,000 words that were added to the English language. So if you want to talk about vocabulary, Shakespeare definitely had it. But I want to learn to have a wider vocabulary, not to impress, but I want to learn every word that's in the Bible. I used to do intensive Bible study classes for 2 weeks in South America, and they would come from different places. And so I gave a quiz every day. And I would never ask a multiple choice. No, I don't want it to be that easy. You got a chance, like 1 in 4, you know, so just make sure you mark it down. I wanted them to write something down all through the test. I had no true and false. Your chances increased to 50%. I didn't want that. I wanted them to write something down. I would have an essay on every test. And that can be challenging if you haven't been doing that. But I wouldn't give points away. But one thing I was pretty exacting on, if you didn't spell a Bible word correctly, I would take off 1/4 of a point. 1/4 of a point. Because I had one fellow, good friend, preach a lot, and I wanted to preach since he was a young boy. But he did a track on Revelation, not dealing with the book, but the concept of God's revealing himself with words. And he misspelled Revelation. Because if there are Spanish speakers here or have had experience, the V and the B are sometimes pronounced the very same way. And sometimes they don't know that there is a slight difference between a V and a B. And I told him, no one will take it seriously enough if you can't spell the very word that you want to talk about, the word revelation. And he saw that point. I don't make those points like, you know, own yourself, wake up. No, I know they want to do well. I want to talk to people, always on the basis that they want to do better. All they need is someone that encourages that. So it will tell you a little bit how I am about reading and about how to treat the Bible. The first lesson you just heard me say, read aloud. And when you're doing your reading for services, read aloud before you come. I can tell the college kids that. Reading is a privilege. It is not a right. You have to avail yourself of the opportunity to read. And when we all read well, it will have ramifications further out there than you can imagine. It will help our children to read. I've told kids that I've worked with before, you need, if you're going to go to a university, even in Argentina, you need to either be a whiz in math or you need to be a good reader. If not, maybe you're going to learn when you go to the university, but the institution will be very difficult for you. So, learn to read. I would tell the kids, if you learn to read well the Bible, you are listening and reading the greatest book ever written, the mind of God. And if you can understand the mind of God, I believe anything else out there can be confusing because it is not the mind of God. But you are more equipped. You remember I said last night, the girl who made her own copy of the New Testament, wrote it out by hand. If she made a mistake, she didn't white it out, she tore it out and started all over again. And in a year, a little more than a year, at an hour a day, she wrote her own copy of the New Testament. She has since told me that doing that encouraged her to want to go to the university. She tells me when she had to write essays or reports, even scientific things, because she became a nurse, she said, I always had a good syntax, a good structure to the sentence, because she'd given attention to that detail, and she didn't have spelling mistakes. And some people will laugh, well, Spanish is the easiest language not to misspell. Oh, you'd be wrong. Like the letter B and the letter V, they sound a lot alike, but they're different. And then double L can be pronounced like a Y in the same language, and wow, they learn the words. They don't just work on how it sounds. So she wasn't making mistakes like that. And I'll tell you, on grading papers, I love grading the paper that's going to get 96%. Because when I correct the paper, I put in the right answer. And so sometimes it's like I've got to take the test over myself, and I get writer's cramp, correcting all these tests. So, yeah, if I can get 100, it's just, okay. But when I'm having to correct someone that's had a hard time, I still want them to know the right answer. So when I've been doing these classes, I've been staying up just as late as anyone studying for the next class. And I would always give the test. This is maybe something I really wanted when I was a kid. I didn't understand why teachers understand that. But I didn't understand why teachers didn't grade the papers and give it back the next day. But I learned a little bit there. But with a class of 20, maybe 18, I could grade them all. It'd take a few hours. But I wanted them to learn. And that's what we're about in reading. We want people to learn what God has said. So reading aloud, please give that a number one point. Read units. That's my second group. I only have 4, so don't get afraid. Read units. And by that I mean I'm very strict here. If I'm trying to read the book of Genesis, I do not read any other book of the New or Old Testament. I finish Genesis before I move to another book. Reading units. Now, I saw that even in high school. The need to read a unit. And if you don't learn that pretty soon, you don't realize how confusing that can be. Even when I was teaching little children, my favorites and favorite class would be to try to teach them the Bible story even at their level, even before school age level. I wanted them to learn the chronological order without putting that term on it. I never told a story where I would ask a question on the test that would take you back. It was always moving forward. Because I'm not trying to stump you. I'm trying to get it ingrained in you, a sequence. And ever how simple it is, I want them to get the sequence. Learn to read units. Please don't start in the middle of a psalm that is Hebrew poetry and say, I'll quit and come back. I can't even put the book down till I finish the psalm. If it's Psalm 119, I know it's long. It doesn't take long to read Psalm 119, but I'm not going to stop there. Every psalm gets its attention because I believe in reading units. But can I tell you the benefit of that if you do it for a lifetime? You always know what comes after what you're reading. You always know what came before what you are reading. And that is a tremendous benefit to being a Bible student, but it has to start with reading. I mentioned the other night, Ephesians chapter 3, where Paul said he got it by revelation, and he wrote it down briefly, so that when you read, you may understand, Paul will say, my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. And I really believe people think, no, I got to study. I want you to study. I enjoy studying. But you're going to have to learn to read. And what do you know to study if you haven't read it? I think sometimes we go through the Bible wanting cliff notes. You know, I didn't want to read Romeo and Juliet the first time it appeared. I would dearly welcome someone just tell me what it's about, and that'd be enough for me. You don't want that with the Bible. You want the privilege and the pleasure of discovering what God wants to say. And if we don't communicate that well, our children grow up not wanting to read. And the greatest book ever to be read. And people you would know in history would be very thankful to have what we have in our Bible today. The printing press, to me, was a great blessing in the providence of God. It gave the Bible to the world. They probably didn't realize. I'm wondering, I think they probably did. But to have a unit that people would read, and that was the first book that was selected to have in English, to have in German. We were talking yesterday, and I read, I know Shakespeare is credited with giving 2,000 words to the English language. We've already mentioned that. But Martin Luther, the German language today is indebted to him because it was bringing the language where everybody would be speaking the same. And to think, speaking the same from the Word of God, what a beautiful way to unite people in conversation where they use the same words of the Bible, and that helps them to be better thinkers. the best. Look up all the words you don't know. Not because you have to know Greek, or I enjoy playing with Greek, but I'm not a Greek scholar. I enjoy playing with Hebrew, diddling, or, it's just really elementary what I do with Hebrew, but I love it. And I've learned to love it, even from the book of Genesis, where I learned all names have meaning, all of them. Sometimes people say, I have one for John in the New Testament, that means that God is gracious and merciful. Somebody say, wait a minute, you mean all of that is in that little word that is John? Well, there are sentences used in the Bible in names. Abraham, father of a multitude. That's why his name was changed. Even before he had one child, in the sense of the child of promise and how that blessing would be fulfilled. I love Abimelech. All the 80 words are father's words. You learn that in Abraham. The letter I is the possessive pronoun in Hebrew. My daughter's called Abigail. I picked that name on purpose. She loves that name. But Abigail, father, I, or mine, not I, and Gail is the word for joy. My father's joy. I love giving her a name like that. She's pleased to have that name because I selected it with purpose. And because I told some people in the last few days, I go into banks, I have interaction with people. I remember I went to a UPS store and someone had the name Beth Sarah. I just love things. Do you know the meaning of your name? And almost always they say, no, I don't. And I like saying, well, the Beth word's the Hebrew word for house. And Sarah's the Hebrew word for princess. So you have a very interesting name. I have better stories than that. The word Bethlehem, Beth is the house word. Bethlehem is house of bread. And I just delight in the fact that the bread of life came from the house of bread. Don't you like those kind of combinations? I went ahead of myself with Abimelech. A-B, father, I, Melech is the word for king. Now, there's some irony in that name, at least for me, because Gideon gave that son that name. After his tremendous victory that God worked through him, the people wanted to make him king. I will not be king. My children will not be king. The Lord, a real focus there. And then later, he names the child, my father is king, and that would be pointing back to him. No, you should have chosen another name. Can you see what I'm saying? And so when you read, you see, well, that's a very beautiful name to understand, but was inappropriately given, it was said, when he named his son, my father is king, and he was the father. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you're somewhat surprised in reading that way. And so keeping up with those things will always help you. And so read aloud, look up the words, and read units. And my fourth one, read slowly. I'm not saying you have to read slowly for public reading, but don't rush through a sentence. By the way, reading aloud will keep you where you'll know if your mind is drifting. You'll say, well, Tom, I thought you said it will keep your mind. I hope I said it will help to keep your mind from drifting. but it can drift. And so, how do you know that? Well, when I'm reading and I see a question or an affirmation, and I read the words and read them aloud, but I did not read them with any kind of understanding. So, what do? I gotta back up and read it again. I want to read it well before I go on even to the next sentence. Now, I can tell you something about sentences. In Ephesians chapter 1, not for sure, but I think it's the longest sentence in the New Testament. It's over 200 words. And it's been punctuated in the New King James where it would be 3 sentences. But if you got 200 words and you divide it by 3, if you're evenly dividing it, it could be from 60 to 70 words in one sentence. Do you ever read a sentence like that? I don't. And you know why we don't? Because we've been more accustomed to reading narratives than in reading a sentence. There's a book out, and I've read, I would say, through it too lightly, but it teaches people how to read. To me, that's the book they should use in school from the first grade on. I don't mean it's got to be at the level, it's a university type book, but they need to learn to appreciate sentences. And I'm afraid people don't read with an understanding of a sentence. That will always do you good. Now, in regard to reading, I have some other things I try to do. The Bible has 1,189 chapters. Okay. How much time are you going to give? Well, I like telling people you can read 4 chapters a day. Is that too much to ask? 4 chapters a day. And in a year, you can read the Old Testament once and the New Testament twice, and you have a day to spare. So you can do something with that. I don't think that's enough. But if you've never done that kind of reading, start now. Start now. It's accessible. And so, you know, so what will happen if everybody reads like they should? I think my lessons will improve. You know, if everyone is somewhat indifferent to reading, maybe I can sound interesting and they're pleased, but they're not being educated in regard to what God said. They may say, well, Tom seems to explain it very well. I surely hope so. But if I read it well, and you read it well, you don't need me as much. You know, you can see it for yourself. Just like I was telling my first time home Bible students, I want you to hear the word of God come from your lips. That is a tremendous blessing. It can help you to purify your thoughts. Because God's not going to put anything corrupt in you. Now, very appropriately, I can say, do you know what book of the Old Testament the Hebrew rabbis would teach first? We generally teach Genesis. Now, you know, let's be honest with Genesis. There are a lot of stories being told there that I don't quite want to tell a 5-year-old. There's incest, there's rape, there's lying. You know, I try to measure myself, and I think rightfully so. I'm not trying to educate kids in all the vices that were out there, but I need them to learn. You know what the first book is? Leviticus. But Leviticus, that book I've been afraid of for years. And they are teaching their young boys. Now, why would they do that? I have an idea. You know, I grew up watching cowboy movies. You could always tell who the good guy was. He wore the white hat. Even in a fight, his hat didn't fall off. You know, he was clearly marked as a good guy. Leviticus is really black and white. And it's these books that you're not having to say, well, is this out of context? Or, you know, it's clearly stated. And one of the great phrases the Lord said. The Lord said. By the way, that's the way the prophets will preach. Thus says the Lord. But it's the idea, the Lord said. And the only time you can just say, I want to soak it in, is when the Lord says. I don't care about what Pharaoh says. He may enlighten me with some observation. I gave you one last night. He helped me for the first time, I think, to appreciate symmetry. When he said, tell your father to come to Egypt, and he can live on the fat of the land, the best of Egypt. Those are synonymous phrases. So I learned that fat and best is a synonymous statement. So I just want to know, there are times you can learn something about reading from whomever, but where you want to stop and soak it in is every time it's the Lord saying it. Now, maybe I mentioned this the other night, but bears repeating. A lot of times people say, we don't need the Old Testament. And I will say, yes, you do. Because the first book of the New Testament that came into existence, and they're still saying this, is 1 Thessalonians in the year 50 AD. If I can use that terminology. Wait a minute. The Lord died on the cross in the year 33. Some will tell you 35, and I know why, because of governing, now I don't want to mispronounce his name, but a ruler that was governing at that time only governed 1 year. So he kind of shortens the grid, and now they're saying 35 would be, because the Lord is born 2 years later than being given credit for it. And the New Testament's giving you the orientation. We are trying to put a date on it, and sometimes we don't put the right date. But 50 years, that means 15 to 17 years, they didn't have a New Testament. So what did they use? Well, they had inspired men. And obviously Peter and John, they were eyewitnesses of the life and teachings of Jesus. The 12 were. But the 12 can't be everywhere. They can go to a lot of places, but you can only be at one place. And if you hadn't written a letter or anything to educate them, you did a lot when you were there, but you would be showing them. Have you ever noticed how the New Testament is always quoting the Old Testament? One book that I enjoyed reading, it's not that it's infallible, but the Old Testament and the New Testament. And how the New Testament draws from that. We need to do well to do the same. And so, learning to appreciate, yes, I like telling people the Bible condemns sexual immorality in the New Testament. But can you define it? I don't know how you can define it without going back to the Old Testament. You see, the Old Testament was our tutor. It was meant to prepare us for the Lord. But the Lord's not, I try to tell people, the revelation of the Lord is progressive. I don't want to use it in a political way, but it is definitely out there. And it's what the Old Testament was looking forward to, the coming of the Lord. But the Lord used the Old Testament a lot. One thought just along that line, when the Lord used the Old Testament, he quoted from, at least in our Bibles, the Septuagint. Well, there's a lesson there. How many people tell us things are lost in translation? That's a favorite thing they like to say. But if the Lord could quote from a Greek copy of the Hebrew text, doesn't that say that he believes the Bible can be translated into another language? It's not that you don't need to study Hebrew and Greek, but not in the definitive way that will make me an expert, but maybe it can help me to appreciate more. I don't want anyone to think anything to appreciate the Word of God is a waste of time. I do not think that. But if one text from another language could be authorized, if the Lord quotes from it, it's being authorized. If the apostles quoting from it, and they do, they're authorizing. So I know I can read another translation. But you can always compare them. I like telling people, if you're learning another language, you can learn a big vocabulary with Bible words and seeing them in English and in Spanish. I always tell people, this is an aside, when you name your kids, give them at least one Bible name. Why? Because anywhere they go in the world, they have the name in the other language. I went to South America with Gardner Sewell Hall. Gardner Sewell Hall is the third. His dad is the second, and there was another brother who died in the family in 1978. And so there are 3 generations there. Same name. Well, when Gardner went to Argentina, they had a hard time pronouncing Gardner. And Sewell, I named my son after Sewell Hall. And if they didn't read it, they could really pronounce it pretty well. But when they see it, that shed whale, it just threw them off. So you can make it a wonderful experience. My parents didn't name me Thomas because it was a Bible name. But I'm glad they did. They could always say Thomas. And, I don't have to worry about explaining how to pronounce my name. Give them a Bible name. That will help a lot. Well, I got 5 more minutes, and this is one of my favorites. In reading, I want to read slowly, I've said. Pronounce the words. I was in a doctor's office last week, and one lady was crediting me for giving her an electronic Bible with headphones. I told her I would have loved to have done that, but I did not do that. But she said, yes, you did. Well, I feel sorry for the person that did because she didn't remember that person. But the other lady was talking about Bible reading and how hard it is to pronounce some of the words. Yeah, I know that. Genealogies. And I said, and she said, but what I do, I see a word I can't pronounce. I click on it, go to Google, and I find how to pronounce it. I know a better one. Won't take that much time. Maybe one day they'll do it where you click on it and have it pronounced immediately. But listen to a professional Bible reader. They've given attention to pronouncing. And I told her, the thing you want to do when you don't know how to pronounce, move your lips to make that sound, but it's not yours just yet. But to help you to learn how to move your mouth to pronounce it. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 1 through 9, all genealogy. You read that and you say, okay, I got through it. And 2 or 3 chapters later, they come back again. The book is heavy with genealogy. Can you imagine how long it will take to read the book? If you click, go to Google, come back, you're going to spend more time than you realize. Learn to read with a good Bible reader. That will save you time. You see, I really do believe we ought to do much more in Bible reading. You know, Paul did give the admonition, give attention to reading. And a lot of times, you know, well, that's what folks tell me, like it won't have any application to me. No, don't think that way. Anything that's good for any Bible character to do would be something for you to give attention to. And so, give the attention to the Bible reading. When I read, well, a lot of the students have been with me, know that I like to say, and it's not meant to be a criticism of any teacher, but there are no boring books of the Bible. No, not one. We may not know how to present it. I've heard people say, Leviticus, no, that's a hard book. I want to make it interesting. So they will want to read it. But then I get pushback, and well, what do you do, Brother Holley, with the book of Chronicles? Well, I know where you're coming from. You know, if I read the Bible, that doesn't, it's like, oh, what do you mean? I know what they mean. How do you deal with genealogies? Well, I tell everyone, I know it can be done. I may not be the person that's able to do it, but I've given attention to try. And that's the way we want to be. Now, genealogies are important to y'all. Like Dan was telling me, his ancestors founded Nashville, Tennessee. Wow. Everybody would love to read their genealogy and find the person that came over on the Mayflower. Hey, I'm from him. You see, when you're part of the history, you want to know. And this is our history. The children of God. And the people he has called to be his own. Give attention to reading. Yes.
Can you discuss very, very briefly the 1% of your day and the cycle reading that you were describing to me last
Well, obviously, if I just read 4 chapters, I can do that in 15 minutes. Reading it aloud. Having read it many times, it's easier for me to read it aloud. The same will happen with you. But I probably give at least an hour or more just to Bible reading. And then I'm working on, right now, I'm not trying to sell anything, but I'm planning and have done a few lessons on the book of Luke in a reporting way. And I want the whole book to be available. I want Leviticus to be available. I want Jeremiah to be available. Those are the books I think I've used tremendously. But there's more to be done. And I'm feeling like, in some ways, I'm running out of time because I do have Bible classes. I have people in Chile that love to study, and that would be an hour in itself. And I have many Bible classes, online. We may not have Bible studies when we're young, but we're preparing to be able to do them all along the way. It never stops. And I must continue. I feel like if I do Luke, and it is my home Bible study book, and I talk about reading and rereading, I have read that commentators from the past would read their book 100 times before they would write one word. Well, I believe I've read Luke more than 100 times. It's not as easy as you think. I'm not just trying to say, I got Luke read finally 100 times. But over the course of a life, and all my whole Bible study, and then my reading and studying, in that regard, it pushes it up there. But one more illustration. I do a wheel within a wheel. And my easiest way to explain, I've done it with Jeremiah, I've done it with Leviticus, but John's the easiest way to explain. John is a book of 21 chapters. So, 3 chapters a week, you can read the Gospel of John. This is what I do with my wheel within a wheel. I read chapter 1, 2, and 3, then chapter 1 again. I read 4, 5, and 6, chapter 2 again. 7, 8, 9, chapter 3 again. Aloud. All of it's aloud. I get to chapter 21, I read all of that, and I read chapter 7 again. And then I start over, and it's chapter 1, 2, and 3, now chapter 8 again. And I've done that in a year, and it was like 64 times reading through the Gospel of John. I can do that with Jeremiah. All you have to do is divide the book of Jeremiah so that it works within the framework of a week. Now, Jeremiah has 52 chapters. So you'd be thinking 7 chapters, but occasionally you got to incorporate the 3 chapters that are still left over. And so I try to put those 3 chapters in where the reading might be shorter. But I get to read the book of Jeremiah 64 times. All right. I want you to think about that. I'm always preparing my lessons on the basis of reading it aloud. I used to be a topical preacher, and I still, in a way, preach topics. But I have maybe, back then, maybe 40 or 50 verses in my sermon. I would read the chapter from where all those verses came from. before I would preach that lesson concept. You see what I'm saying? It's not, oh yeah, I know what that one said. I know what it says, but I want to appreciate the context in which it was said. I feel more comfortable using it. Can I give you an example why I could be more comfortable? For a lack of vision, the nation will perish. But we use vision like with anticipation, and we can see the consequence of things. That's not quite the meaning of that word. It's what God says will keep a nation from falling. And I just want to appreciate that in a context, not just because the 21st century usage of vision lends itself to say, oh, we got visionaries in industry and Elon Musk, he's a visionary. No, not in the biblical context. And so I don't want to play on the sound. I want to deal with the word. This will be a good time to shout, right? Thank you for listening. This is what I really like to talk about.